Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Faith Journey. I am so happy that you are tuned in and listening, or maybe watching if you are on YouTube. My name is Camilla, and I'm on this journey of documenting my life with newfound faith in Jesus. I always say this at the beginning, but regardless of where you are on your journey, I appreciate that faith journeys are different for every single person, literally. And maybe you're listening and you don't call yourself a Christian, don't have any faith in your life at all. Wherever you are, whatever your situation is, you're so welcome here. And these conversations are literally for anyone. You don't need a prerequisite to be able to understand it or to listen to it. And I just hope that it encourages you and it makes you curious about the person of Jesus. And if you know Jesus already, if you have a relationship with God, then I just pray that this encourages you in whatever way you need, essentially. I came back yesterday from a week away. I was away traveling for work, which is always really exciting and it's really fun, but it's also quite tiring. So I'm really, really pleased to just be home now and really grateful to have a home to return to and to have a place that feels very safe. And so I'm glad to be back and I'm really excited about the topic of today's conversation. I kind of thought that what I could speak a little bit into is just about how I started going to church for the first time by myself as someone that had never really been, and what it's kind of like to go to church for the first time, what my experience was, whether, you are alone and basically, going to church for the first time, like was the case for me, or whether you're coming back maybe to church after being away from it for a little while. There's an important bit here that's also about just loneliness. That's something that I wanted to touch on because it was very linked also to my faith journey and to what sort of ultimately pushed me to seek community and to go to church as well for the first time. And so I think loneliness, it sits really quietly sometimes. It's not everyone's experience, but it kind of sits, I think, for a lot of people, but beside our faith journeys, especially when maybe you're just beginning to explore faith, or when you're walking with Jesus without kind of a family or without a faith community, and sort of without, even close friends perhaps who maybe understand what you're going through, as all of which was kind of how I felt at the beginning of my journey. I'm really excited. I hope this episode speaks to you. What I can speak into, with these episodes is my experience. For me, not growing up in the church or in faith at all. Going to church just obviously wasn't a thing. It wasn't part of my growing up at all. I had a friend when I was really young. Her family was Catholic and they would invite me sometimes to church. And so I think I went a couple of times. Again, I must have been 9 or 10 or so. The last memory that I have of me going to church was probably then. It was kind of a Catholic mass as well, and I can't really remember much of what was happening, to be honest. So in any case, a very, very, very different type of church and different type of church service. My church is not a Catholic church. It's a Protestant church, so things look definitely different. For more than a decade, I think I didn't walk into a church, and it wasn't because I was running from God or anything like that, but because in my case I didn't know him. And I then begun to explore spirituality and explore various faiths as well. And I won't go into the details of these and of this part of the journey because I kind of touch upon it a bit more in, as I said, in the first episode, which is my testimony, my story. And so if you're curious about that and want a bit more context, then I definitely recommend just listening to that one and then sort of coming back. But essentially, fast forward a little bit, something just kind of started to shift because I eventually started to get closer to Jesus, but very, very, very cautiously. And after I had explored many different faiths throughout sort of the past year and a half, it's very much part of how I then felt sort of led at some point to try and see what going to church felt like, and what people did, and like what does that mean, and what does church even mean. I'll get into this as well, but I started to have this pull, this pull to Jesus. And it didn't start in a very big or a very dramatic way. It was a process, me feeling this gravitation, and this attraction towards exploring Christianity. It was almost like a very gentle stirring of sorts that I just couldn't explain. There was no moment when, in my life, in my experience, when someone kind of sat me down and kind of told me about who Jesus was and so on, and then was like, hey, why don't you come to church with me? Or any moment either where I was like, oh, okay, from tomorrow on I'm exploring Christianity. It wasn't like that. It was a journey that kind of begun and then very transitionally, slowly, then led me to fully give my life to Christ. I started to feel this hunger that sort of rose up in me, out of honestly real desperation at that point. And I needed healing, and I knew that. I was really aware of it, and I needed comfort, and I needed community, and that's really, really what I was looking for. And I knew that, a year before that point, I had experienced something that I just couldn't put words to, a specific moment in my bedroom, in that case, where for the first time I just felt something that I never felt before. I felt someone, close to me, a presence, an incredibly sort of loving presence that I had never experienced in my life. And again, episode 1 is the best one to listen to, because it's all about that and how I got to that point. But that sort of kick-started the whole exploration phase of my faith journey. And I also want to say that it's going to be different for everyone. People just have very different journeys. We're all individuals with different backgrounds, with different, family upbringings, different situations. And so if you don't really if my story doesn't really make sense to you, it doesn't mean anything. None of our testimonies are like better or not, or like more impressive or not. It's all about God. It's all about what he's capable of doing. It's all about how he comes and helps us and just loves us. Now I know that presence that I felt, that moment, that was God's Spirit, right? It was the Holy Spirit. But at that time, I didn't have the language. I had no idea that I had been sort of filled by the Holy Spirit for the very first time in a way that was super powerful. And I didn't have the language. I didn't know. And I also didn't know how to describe it to myself, let alone anyone else at that point. All I knew was that I was being led by also wanting to figure out who it was that I had experienced, what it was that I had felt in that moment, and that had, for a really brief moment, changed and changed my heart and gave me so much peace and so much love when I had none. And so that sort of cautious curiosity started to grow very quickly, actually, but very deeply as well. Every day I just felt more and more inclined to explore, maybe music or podcast, or look up text and books. Books have been such a big way for me to explore faith as well. So it wasn't a loud decision. It was more like, what if I kind of go to a church service on a Sunday? So I had that curiosity, and one day I remember being like, oh, okay, what if maybe I try that? And so I sort of Googled, what, London churches, basically. And because I had no idea where to start. It's so overwhelming, or I felt really overwhelming. It doesn't have to be, but that's definitely how it felt for me, because I wasn't in this space at all. And so then this pull towards Jesus started growing stronger and stronger, and I really didn't know what to do with it, if that makes sense. Like, I only knew at that point of this one church that I kind of found on Google, and it was a big church. It's a big church that I had heard about, but I'd never obviously been to, and I didn't even know like what kind of church it really was, and so on. But I just kind of opened my calendar one day and I picked a Sunday and I just kind of wrote, in it, like, okay, church service. So I just wrote it in and I kind of planned on going on that Sunday, and I didn't tell anyone. My whole journey was really individual. It was very private. I didn't feel like I had people that I could talk to about it. On the day of, I was grabbing coffee with a friend before that, totally normal, like any other kind of weekend situation. And afterwards, I kind of said goodbye, we said our goodbyes and we walked in different directions. And then I kind of turned back and it felt sneaky, but not in like a good, adventurous way necessarily. It felt like I was living this parallel life. Like there was this entire part of myself that was really, the main thing in my life that was going on. This big thing that was unfolding underneath the surface of, my poker face, or, the just what I was conveying. And the truth is, I just didn't have, people to share it with without sounding too intense, without sounding lost. I was really worried as well about what other people would think. And so that made me feel just really isolated and really lonely as well. Even though, you still have people around you, or I still had like people around me, I still felt quite lonely because I wasn't able to be like fully authentic and fully myself. And I just want to say, if that is you as well, my heart is really with you. And I know it's really difficult, but it's why I want to talk about finding community and going to church, because I know that so many of us are actually feeling like that, especially if you're exploring faith for the first time without like signposts or without any like frames of reference really, like it was for me. And so I was kind of walking towards something that felt sacred in a way, something that I was really deeply drawn to, and yet I felt like I had to hide it, and that sense of being split in two, of living a life where no one fully sees the whole of yourself. That was one of the hardest things for me to have to carry, and the more, I kept going, the harder it sort of became as well. And maybe, yeah, that's where some of you are right now. And if that's the case, you're so not alone. As I just said, you're so not alone. There's so many people who are exploring faith, which is such a tender process. But my encouragement is just that there's so many people with faith in their lives, so many people who love Jesus, who are just ready to welcome you, and they're so ready to support you. And that there's people that are mature in their faith and that are ready, to just help you and guide you as well. And it's the most beautiful thing. It's the most beautiful thing, I think. And it's just a matter, I know it's very scary to like put yourself out there, but it's so rewarding. And the maybe, the awkwardness or the fear that you might have, it's just don't let that hold you back. Don't let that hold you back, because it's temporary. There's so much goodness in community, and of course, and ultimately also just walking with God in your life. Faith is so beautiful. Like, faith journeys are so beautiful, but they can be really isolating when you don't have community around you. And one of the most unexpected parts for me of following Jesus, of when I started to follow Jesus really, and choosing to do that, especially maybe if it's brand new for you as well, is just how lonely it can feel. And I felt like no one was really talking about this. Like, I was looking around and I just felt like everyone was in community and everyone had all these people that they could go to, and I kind of didn't. And I didn't really stop, myself from then putting myself in those environments. And I think I'm actually very proud of myself for that. And I'm very just grateful for the way the pull that I had towards God, the way God was leading me towards Him was so much stronger than that fear or that awkwardness that I kind of had. That's also why I think I really wanted to talk about this, and it's why I'm, week on week, I'm really just trying to sit here and just talk about these situations and talk about these, different circumstances that come with finding faith and with starting to follow Jesus and so on, because I know that I think would have appreciated someone kind of saying that. So I'm really doing this to give glory to God and to make people feel less alone. You expect spiritual awakening, let's say, to feel like full and alive and overflowing, and it does. I mean, it's so beautiful. There's so many parts of it that just gave me so much joy, and I could see, myself really changing and loving that. But there's also other ways where it can feel like stepping into the wild. Like it felt like I was stepping into this unknown, of like, I have no idea how this is going to end. Like, I've got no idea how this will end, when it will end, but I just know that I have to do this. And the truth is that that's because a lot of us are exploring or are walking, with God and going through faith journeys without a proper support system around us. And of course, we've got God with us, right? And that's the best support that we can ever ask for. But it's also difficult, sometimes to keep doing that without having people around you that can lift you up and support you and guide you closer to Him and really encourage you as well to keep that curiosity alive. I didn't have at that point friends that were following Jesus, that knew Jesus. I didn't have a single person really that I could call up or just kind of say, hey, I think I've met God, or like, hey, I think there's a God. I didn't have that. And it felt like a very solo thing. And parts of me, I think, with this whole like loneliness thing, I think there's a part of me that needed that moment of independence, that moment of just solitude with God and with trying to understand and listen to Him, even though I had so many questions and so many things were really, really challenging. I think there was a need for me to be just with Him in that moment. But at the same time, you kind of reach a point, and I reached a point where community was just so needed. It was needed, and we can't do this thing alone. This faith thing, we can't do it alone, and we can't live our faith, our lives sort of following Jesus alone. There's a psalm, which is Psalm 68, and I'll just read verse 5 and 6. So it goes, "A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in His holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land." So in particular, this line, God sets the lonely in families. I think this is so accurate to what we're talking about, is so relevant to what we're talking about. And what I've really come to believe is that this verse, when I was reading it for the first time, it's not just about like earthly families, it's not just about the family system or whatnot. It's also about like the way God designs us, No one is meant to be doing life alone. And I really believe that. I don't think anyone is meant to walk this journey of faith alone either. We're made for community. Going back to our ancestors, they lived in community. And I think it's really hard now in these days. And there's so many teachings on this. So, just please go and explore, theologically like sound and deep conversations on this by so many great people out there. I really like Joan Mark Comer's and the Practicing the Way series on community. His teachings there are really, really nice, and they've been really, really useful for me. So anyway, it's just to say, I think, especially if you live, I think, in a city like London, there's a lot of independence. Listen, I'm the first one, to say I'm like a very independent person, and I love that. But at the same time, there needs to be a community to share your life with. There needs to be a support system of people you can serve, of people you can love, of people you can support, and of people that can do all those things right back to you. And that's the beauty of community. When you're lonely, it's not a sign that something is wrong necessarily, like with you. I think it's often the evidence that like your soul was made for connection, divine connection with God, but also human connection with other people, with other people that are also wanting to live their life following God. And this verse is really a promise. These verses that we read, they're not suggestions or nice poetries. These are promises that God makes. And it's a promise that God is not going to just leave us in a place of spiritual isolation, if that makes sense. He had a plan to place me not randomly, but really intentionally into a family, into a church, into community. And not just into a church, but into my church. And I think at some point I'll speak into how I knew that was the church for me. But right now I just want to talk about just going to church generally and finding that community and seeking community. And it takes time. It isn't instant, I think. I'm still relatively new to, my church. But over the months that sort of followed once I started going, I really started to see this verse come true in my life. Right now, I'm at the point where I am meeting just real, beautiful, imperfect, Jesus-loving people. And I'm finding friends and I'm finding community. And I'm just so grateful and so excited. I'm still navigating this whole thing of being authentic and being true to my faith and staying true to God and seeking community. If He did that for me, someone who really walked into church for the first time, scared and unknowing of what I was going to find, I fully believe that He'll totally do that for you too, and I really, really, really want to encourage you to just consider this, finding a local church and exploring that aspect as well of faith, which is so important and such a beautiful gift. That first service that I had ever been to, in that sort of big church that I mentioned at the beginning, but also the first services in my current church, they didn't like magically fix things, but something clicked, and the presence of God, like Jesus, just kept showing up again and again and again. And it was that feeling that, that presence of God, the presence of the Spirit that I had felt, that whole year before. And over time, I then started to actually learn what church actually is about. And this is something that I think for me was really important, and I really now want to talk into it a little bit. I started to understand that church isn't a building like I thought. It's not like a program of sorts that you kind of get into. It's not pressure to perform in any way. Church is not hype. It's not a performance. Going to church is not like just a fun concert, if that makes sense, or like a nice gathering. It's not even something that you just go to when you feel guilty or when you want to be a better person, or something that you go to kind of quote unquote tick the, good Christian box, whatever that means. It's not. I'm really learning that it's not about that. How does Jesus think about church? Like, what does He say that church is? And He never really talked about church in all these ways that I've spoken about. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I with them. This is Matthew 18:20. So Jesus is all about people. We see it in the Gospels. He's all about presence. He's all about proximity to people as well. And what's so incredible to me is that Jesus didn't just like build a temple or a stage at all. He just gathered people. He ate with people. That's how he did community. He walked with people. He helped people. He cried with people. And then one day he looked at those very people that were really flawed, inconsistent, but so deeply loved. And he said, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. And that's what church is meant to reflect, I think. Not a room full of strangers that are kind of listening to just a message, and then, they leave church and keep going with their day like nothing happened, and so on. But it's like a table of friends, of people that are following Jesus together. And I know this might sound a little bit corny, but just like stay with me for a second. It's about people, it's the body of Christ. That is what the church is. And if you follow Jesus, you are part of the global church, which just means all denominations, all people, all country, all backgrounds, all situations, all together because of Christ and because of Jesus and because of what he's done for us. And church is a space, not necessarily a physical space, although of course people gather in a physical space, but it's a space that God uses to gather us, to shape us, to heal us as we serve one another. And it's not just showing up to be quote unquote like fed, right? It's choosing to belong. And I really needed that. I needed to see that following Jesus wasn't something that I had to do alone, that even the loneliness that I felt at the beginning of my journey, it wasn't meant to last, it wasn't meant to stay. And that's exactly the same for you as well, if you feel lonely in this period that you might be walking through. Church, as God sort of designed it, is where that starts to change, and not perfectly, not instantly, but just so beautifully. And I just love it. I love going to church every Sunday. I think Sunday has become probably my favorite day of the week. I get to see my friends. I get to pray over people. I get to be in community. I get to serve my community as well, in my church, whether I know everyone by name or not, whether I recognize their faces or not, because again, I'm still meeting people. You serve everyone in the same way. And I'm starting to find something that I was searching for so long, the presence of, God in my life, of course, but also of people and of community, a community of believers. I love being around people that I can be fully myself with, that I can share my faith with, that I can ask questions, people who know Jesus, people who teach me, people that I can love and support and serve. And now I have people who pray for me, which always makes me like full of gratitude, so full of gratitude. And some, like when people ask like, hey, can I pray for you? Or when people tell me like, oh, by the way, like I was praying for you today and then I thought about this thing. It's such a generous, loving act, and it's so powerful, and I'm so grateful. And you can do that the more you actually get to know people in community, the more you get to know people in your church, the more you speak to them, the more you get close to them. And through church, I'm really meeting people who sit with me, my moments of challenge and encourage me in my growth. Mentors, spiritual mentors. I found friends. There's this sense of like, I want to learn from you. God uses the church, this specific church for me, at the right time in my journey to begin to heal things, those things that I knew that were there and that needed healing, but also those that I wasn't even aware were broken. And that's challenging sometimes, but that's exactly why being surrounded by people that can pour their love into you, people that can help you walk closer to God in those moments is so important. And if you've never been to a church, but maybe you're curious, I just want to encourage you to go. If you're scared to go alone, go anyway. I know it's scary. I really know it's scary. I sometimes still go alone, actually. If you go and you're alone, I'm quite sure that you won't be the only one. I see people going alone all the time. And if maybe you have been going, maybe you are a Christian already and you've been going, but the spark is sort of gone, maybe just keep showing up. Don't lose faith. Don't lose faith. Keep showing up. And you might walk in alone in a church, but you're not walking into loneliness when you enter a church. And I think that's the point of this whole episode, really. I think if there's one thing that you want, that I hope you can take away from it, is this. You might walk in alone, but you're not walking in loneliness. Jesus is waiting for you. He's not waiting in judgment. He's not waiting in pressure. He's not going to be pressuring you. There's no pressure ever. If you feel pressured by anyone to go to church, then that's not the right motive to go. That's not why you should be going to church. You should be going to church, I think, to find community, to be surrounded, by people that can support you and people that you can equally support. We go to church to meet with God, to cultivate moments of stillness, which are really hard, I think, to cultivate these days. I started going to church out of love, not out of pressure, and I think that's how it should be. So I think you're being invited for something that is fully for you. For me, it's like the reminder that Jesus sees us. He knows when we feel lonely, he knows when we feel scared, and that's exactly why he's with us in those moments. So whether you're walking in a church for the first time and you're kind of scanning the room kind of nervously, which I've done so many times, or whether, you're kind of a few months in already and, you're still going and no one maybe really knows your name. Again, I really get that. But he's with you. Like, Jesus is with you. God is in that room. He's always with us. And it's just a moment to seek his face, which just means seek his presence and focus on him in the presence of others as well, collectively. And he's not just inviting you to church, as I said, he's inviting us into a story, into a new story, one where healing happens through people, where friendships are formed in really unexpected ways with unexpected people. This is what we have to keep believing in faith. And I really have so much faith and so much expectancy as well in this area of my life for God to just keep placing people in my life that I can love and that can love me, seeking, his will for our lives and having fun as well. Just go, just try it. Honestly, just try it. And I think all that you need is just a willingness to show up when it's easy, but also to show up when it's hard and when you don't want to go. And for me, I just always trust every Sunday. I just trust that God is already in that church and he's already there and he's just there waiting for me. For me to come and meet him. That quiet decision maybe that you make in your heart to start exploring churches in your local area, it matters. It matters so much. And it could be the beginning of something that you don't even know how to ask for yet. And I look back now and I'm so thankful that God just met me in quiet desperation, that he used my very cautious curiosity that I had when I first explored Christianity, and how he used that as the first steps towards healing, towards community, towards finding freedom. And I just hope that you'll give him the space to do the same in your story. There's so much, again, that I could say about community and about going to church, but it's been so beautiful and I just love it so much. And I really, really, really want to encourage you, if you feel lonely in this moment, if you feel, like you don't really know and you're scared to go, it's temporary. And there's so much goodness. There's so much goodness that comes out of it. So you have got this. Maybe you can ask a friend to go with you if you have someone, or maybe you can reach out to someone that you know is a Christian, perhaps. And I just hope that this encouraged you. If you have any questions, if you have any reflections, anything that stirred up in you and that you want to share with other people listening, that you want to share with me as well, I am always so just open to hearing it. I would love to hear what resonated with you. And you can leave a comment if you want in Spotify. If you're listening on Spotify, you can leave a comment there. You can also leave a comment on YouTube, of course. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast, I've linked below the podcast Instagram and my personal one as well. I hope this was encouraging. I hope, yes, you feel good and empowered and encouraged and excited as well. There's so much excitement. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, whatever your day will bring. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here. I am sending you so much love and so much warmth, and I will see you right here on the faith journey next week. Bye.